Read the disclaimer. Doofus. Also, send any business questions to our new email address. Thank you.
Okay, I opened up last episode with a take that was far from wild. Now it's time to open up with a hot take. Earthrise sucks. No, don't get me wrong. It's far from the worst Generations line. It's not as bad as Fall of Cybertron, and it's nowhere near as boring as the Power of the Primes, but I can't help but feel that everything needed more time to bake in the oven. Unlike the subject of today's episode. Which is to say, salutations, denizens of the internet. I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of Earthrise Skylynx.
Skylynx's vehicle modes are interesting. I mean, they're both well painted and sculpted, which lends to their visual interest.
Which is actually kind of impressive coming from a shuttle with wings that barely tab in, and also a misshapen freezer block, I guess? I don't know what this is.
Not gonna lie, I was kind of expecting them to do more in this mode, thanks to the reviews that you and Dr. Lockdown made on this figure. I mean, this is the vehicle mode. It's basically the most boring thing that both of them do. But the combined vehicle mode does give me something interesting to talk about, so let's get into that. When you attach the shuttle to the freezer block, there's a blue hump on the back. This will slot up into the shuttle, and you'll want to make sure to push forward until you hear a soft click. This sound basically confirms that you've gotten the shuttle into place, and you're now free to push it down into the vehicle mode. The spring-loaded locking mechanism in the front will then basically make sure that the figure won't fall off of the little freezer block. Unfortunately, according to Dr. Lockdown's review of this figure, apparently some people will still experience looseness issues even after properly locking it in. And anyone who has experienced these kinds of issues has my sincerest condolences. But even in spite of these issues, the figure in its combined vehicle mode rolls magnificently. As does the freezer block by itself, but we don't really care about the freezer block now, do we? Now then, before I move on to the beast modes, I've got a base mode to cover, but before we cover that, size comparisons. Here's a Skylynx next to my last review, Studio Series Blitzwing, my last Space Shuttle review, Astrotrain from Earthrise, a standard Qtama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Fraud Side. So overall, Skylynx's vehicle modes are pretty cool, though honestly, they work better together. I mean, on its own, the vehicle mode of the shuttle is going to be cooler, but I think they both work well. Just wish I could say the same about the next mode, so Skylynx, transform.
All your base, all your base, don't belong to us. All your base, all your base.
Now, many of you, if you will think back to my review of Earthrise Astrotrain, you will remember that I thought the airlock gimmick was pretty fun. Now, several months later, like most of this line, I'm starting to find this gimmick incredibly tiresome and tedious. Now, it might help that there's a giant spaceship up there to sort of like make it look like a base. But I don't know, I'm just kind of falling out of love with this gimmick. Then again, considering how stale and repetitive Earthrise has been, and also the fact that I don't really have many of the modulators, maybe I'm just tired of it because I haven't really been using it to its fullest extent? But I don't know. Honestly, I'm hoping that Kingdom revives a lot of my interest in this, like, franchise. Otherwise I might start ditching collecting. And that's not exactly an exaggeration. Now then, in cases such as Earthrise Astrotrain and Optimus Prime, this gimmick is fairly unintrusive because it's in a chunk that's off to the side and not incorporated into the main robot. The problem arises with figures such as Skylynx here, as well as Earthrise Hoist, who decide to incorporate the gimmick into the main body of the figure. In the case of Earthrise Hoist, the kibble that was attached to his shoulders could have been easily incorporated into the backpack if they had just, ditched the whole ramp system they had added there. And with Skylynx, well, it comes at the cost of solidity for the cap mode, so I can't really say it was worth it. But at least I can say that it outclasses Astrotrain's weak-ass launchpad. Ugh. And I don't want to compare onions to apples here, but at least his launchpad came with the good graces to incorporate some pegs to keep the shuttle from flying off. But one good shake of Skylynx's launchpad will send it toppling over. Oh yeah, it's going down, and it's yelling timber. Yeah, so overall, I'm just not a big fan of this mode. So, moving on to the size comparisons, here we have him next to Studio Series Blitzwing, Astro Train, the standard Qtama, a standard can of sparkling water, and Broadside. So, overall, I think the base mode is pretty weak, but that's just because I'm growing kind of cold on the airlock system and the gimmick. I mean, I don't really like the Micromasters to begin with, so I don't really get much use out of this feature. Though I do know there are some people who do like this. And honestly, I'll respect them, but can't help but feel there's a reason that they're being phased out next year. Now Skylynx, transform. Now then, where to begin on these animal modes? I think the color scheme would be a good one to start out with, mostly because it is very patriotic. I really like the combination of red, white, and blue that they used, as well as the off-white paint that they used on the bird component. Though, unfortunately, due to the fact that I'm using my phone camera, the unfortunate truth of the matter is that you might not be able to distinguish between the two. And this is even after I tried to use the contrast feature on the phone, though that's far from the point. The point is that I like the colors. And, yeah, let's get to the problems, and I think the most problematic component of this figure is by far the bird. Now, don't get me wrong, this figure is incredibly fun, and it also allows me to make references to the Untitled Goose Game, but at the same time, it does happen to be incredibly problematic. For starters, you're supposed to plug this massive blast effect that combines from several other smaller blast effects that is repainted from Omega Supreme's blast effect into the mouth. And unfortunately, it's so heavy that it tends to end up weighing down the head and also forcing its jaw open. And speaking of the blast effect parts, the end of the blast effect particle comes with 3 tips. So you can plug it into the boosters on the back of the shell mode, but I lost 2 of them, so there's that. Also, you shake the neck too much, and yeah, the blast effect falls off like a scab. Next up, the legs. Oh, don't get me wrong, I've got some complaints about the Lynx mode's legs, but for this one, yeah, they're pretty crap balance. Also, the tail pops off way too easily, as do the wings most of the time, and also, they have a big ugly cut out of them, so it just looks bad. I mean, I know they exist out of necessity, but you couldn't have done a better job of hiding them? The Lynx component, meanwhile, feels far more stable, and thanks to the paws, it exhibits a far greater range of articulation.
The other thing that I really like about the Lynx that makes me kind of prefer it over the, Sky component is the fact that it really reminds me of Super Sentai. Imagine this thing bounding out of the mist with a belly full of spaceships. And also it turns into a giant robot. I mean, technically it does turn into a giant robot, but an anthropoidal robot. It just gets your imagination running. Just wish I could say the same thing about the base mode.
And while I kind of failed to capture it on camera, the jaws open to a ridiculous degree. So of course he can maul the head off of almost any other Decepticon. Provided it ain't Unicron. You all should know that I don't really tend to go for big figures. Hell, I only have 3 Eliters in my entire collection. But when I do go for something big like Skylynx, it's really freaking impressive. especially considering that other Cybertronians can ride him as a surfboard. That's amazing! And unfortunately, I again forgot to capture on camera that this jaw opens up to a ridiculous degree, so he can be Shin Godzilla like a villain.
I'm a fire in my lady god!
Also, on a totally unrelated note, for some reason, the head, when it's like got the weird collar thing pointed straight up, reminds me weirdly of the Power Rangers SBD badge. Don't know why, but it does. Anyways, size comparisons time. Here's a Skylynx in beast mode next to Astro Train, because my brother stole Blitzwing, the Qtama, the can of sparkling water, and once again I've forgotten to record him next to Broadside. Oh my god, I'm stupid. So overall, Skylynx's beast modes separately are pretty cool, but we both know why they separate. To combine them. So, Skylynx, let's combine! And so we have reached the final culmination of this figure, the Skylynx Combined Mode, also known as the plastic manifestation of all draconic ego. Though once you see this figure in person, you can't really help but see why Skylynx is so infatuated with his own reflection. Just one tiny problem, and that's that this figure might be a little too big. I mean, I just got this light box recently, and it's already starting to test the limits of how big it is. And the kicker is that this is huge compared to my old light box. Though, honestly, that's far from the biggest issue I have with this figure, and it's not even an issue, it's more of a nitpick. Due to the size and weight of the figure, ratchet joints are required on all the limbs. The problem is that I have incredibly sensitive hearing, and these ratchet joints are too loud! However, those are just nitpicks, and my actual complaints are just, I don't know why they included accessories, and also, the attachment of the wings is utter garbage. Now, before I wrap things up, let's do some size comparisons. Here he is next to Broadside, a Qtama, a can of sparkling water, and Astro Train. Unfortunately, I don't think I've stressed enough of the figure's good qualities in this video. Mostly just the ones I don't really like, because, unfortunately, I don't really find this figure interesting. I mean, sure, it is really good, but I'm just having trouble putting my finger on why and verbalizing that. I mean, the articulation's amazing and the paint's good, but they're just... maybe it's just the fact that I'm growing tired of the Earthrise line in general. Or maybe it was because it was too overhyped to me. Either way, it's much better than I'm making it out to be in this video, and I highly recommend it.
So, overall, is the Skylynx set worth purchasing both as a collector's item and as an item for your kids for Christmas? Yes, absolutely. This is the kind of toy that kids need to get with their saved up good deeds for Christmas, or their money, or even like their birthday. They need to have figures like this. They are so good. The only thing that I can say it's missing is maybe some voice-activated electronics, but other than that, solid 9 out of 10 all around. And hey, if you're not willing to get it for the full 80 or 100 bucks, just go over to Amazon where it's 73. But, I mean, it's just a perfect set, both for kids and collectors alike. And that's really there's no bigger praise I can offer it than that. So with that being said, please remember to like this video, share it with your friends, of course if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the notification bell. And this is Firebite27, over and out. And don't forget to check out the Patreon!
Also, before we end off the episode proper, I'd like to apologize for the absolutely abysmal quality of audio in this episode. Unfortunately, I lost the USB extension for my computer, so I can't plug in anything that uses a USB cable. Thanks a lot, Apple! Having said that, I did manage to adjust the onboard mic of my computer so that it sounds better, hopefully. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a bit too harsh on myself. Either way, see you next time.